Hi, everyone. Hey, it's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. This is our live version of Emil Amok's Takeout. Those of you who may have followed my podcast, all like in the low teens, uh, Emil Amok's Takeout is a podcast available wherever you podcast. But every day, Monday through Friday, we do a live version of the Takeout live in my gong closet. We talk to you directly. No salesman will call. We talk to you directly. This is Emil Amok's Takeout Live, number 166, aka WDAT, WDAAT. What does an Asian American think? Because no one ever asks us. I mean, they never say, "Well, what do Asian Americans think? What do they say? Are they saying anything?" Breaking news: Asian Americans are speaking. That's usually what happens, right? Uh-oh, we saw some. They're standing up. They're showing up. For goodness sakes. They're really showing up. I mean, they're serious about it, these Asian Americans. We've been showing up a long time. The fact is, people have just been ignoring us. And that's why we do this. That's why we do this, what I call the micro talk show. The AAPI and the AAXs, we are like super focusing on us. But you don't have to be an AAPI or an AAX, which is my naming convention for Asian American X, right? Filipino AAF, Chinese AAC, Japanese AAJ, although that could be Asian American Jewish. There are a few of those, mixed marriages, that kind of thing. Or you can just be an ALL. If you're none of those, you can be an ALL, which is our catch-all. All. Emil Amok's Takeout, really, thank you for being here with me. Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific. And you know in your clock, you say, Emil, it's only 1:54. What is this? Is practice? No, this is not practice. This is the lanyap, the extra. And today's extra is good because we're still going to talk about, well, in the today's show, we're going to talk to Daniel Phil Gonzales. He is the Asian American Studies professor who was part of the group that started it all in 1968. We're going to talk about some of the big news of the day, those FBI hate crime stats. We're going to talk about 1871, the massacre of 1871. Talk about lots of things today on this show, and we're also going to talk about this thing, this lanyap that I'm going to give you now. We mentioned yesterday the Monday, the 25th, was Larry Itliong Day. Larry Itliong, the Filipino American labor leader who really merged the civil rights era and the labor era together. He merged the two when he began the 1965 Delano Grape Strike, the Great Grape Strike, 1965. Unfortunately, he started it, but it has been pretty much known as Cesar Chavez's thing, his United Farm Workers Union, and it really wasn't, or not at the beginning. Larry Itliong deserves some credit. And so yesterday, the 25th, was his birthday, and it was a state day brought about because of then Assemblyman Rob Bonta, who's now the California Attorney General. He declared Larry Itliong's birthday Larry Itliong Day in California. So a lot of my Filipino friends took the day off. But the significance of Larry Itliong should not be it should not be downplayed. He's significant, and something, you look at parks and streets. I mean, they renamed Army Street in San Francisco. after Cesar Chavez. I didn't see anything named after Itliong. There are a few things. There's a school in Stockton this week in Poplar, California, where Mexicans and Filipinos still work the fields. They named a community center for Larry Itliong. And a lot of people made their way from the Bay Area down to Poplar, and some of them were there and they were a little upset. Some people told me they were a little upset. I said, well, why? I heard from a woman there that she was surprised to hear Dolores Huerta, who was there. Dolores Huerta, who was one of the leaders of the United Farm Workers, in the 70s. But in the reporting I've done, Dolores Huerta's name does not come up often. Later on, yes. And she's a leader of the UFW, one of the remaining living legends of the movement. In fact, she was invited to the White House and she was honored by Obama, Presidential Medal. It's just this one woman I talked to said she was a little surprised when she heard Dolores Huerta make a kind of tongue-in-cheek joke about Larry Itliong, like Dolores Huerta found Larry Itliong and brought him into the movement. Now, I just want to point you to a piece I did for NBC News Asian America in 5 years ago. And it talks about how that strike started. I did the report September 8th, 2015. You can Google it, NBC News, Chavez, and put my name. And it tells the story. And I interviewed the founders of the group, the NFWA, that Chavez was a part of. And I talk about the merger between the Filipinos, the AWOC, the Agricultural Workers Committee, that Larry Itliong was the head of, and the FWA. And the people I talked to there, Gilbert Padilla, who was a co-founder with Chavez of this National Farm Workers Association, they weren't a union. They were just an association. Padilla said to me, Itliong was the man who made the decisions for the negotiations between the NFWA and the AWOC. Larry was the one who made sure we merged together. And that's why the grape strike was significant, because these Filipinos who went on strike for $1.40 an hour, that's what they wanted. They went on their own as AWOC, affiliated with AFL-CIO. The NFWA wasn't close to joining them until about a week after. And then that's when the Mexican Americans joined the Filipinos on strike. Larry was there first, and that's the point. That's why he deserves Larry Itliong Day. And the idea that, no knock on Dolores Huerta, I mean, she deserves a role, a place as a female leader in the farm worker movement. But I talked to Gilbert Padilla. I talked to Paul Chavez. We were there in Delano for the 50th anniversary of the Delano grape strike. And that was the story they told. And you can read it on the NBC News Asian American site. Just Google it, Emil Guillermo, Larry Itliong, NBC News. And it was all because of Larry Itliong that the two groups got together. So that's why we salute Larry Itliong. Go to my column on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog. I write about Larry, his day. I compare him to General Colin Powell, who died last week, Powell, who I praised perhaps a bit too much because he was a far from perfect being. And I set that record straight in that column on the Aldif blog. So check that out. So lots of things you can, you could see and say, oh, yeah, Emil's talking about this. He's talking about that. Yeah. But I was talking to some friends about what happened this Sunday. And it was a big deal because they named a community center in a small town in Poplar, California. Do you know where Poplar, California is? Not many people do. And if you don't know where Poplar, California is, I don't blame you. It's in Tulare County. You just keep going down 99. Poplar. But that's where the real people work and live, off the fields, off the land. And a community center was put in there, named for Larry Itliong. One of the few things they've named after Larry Itliong anywhere. And we remember Larry Itliong the day after Larry Itliong Day because, there could be spillover. There could be, because we're just, the Larry Itliong Day celebration, his birthday on October 26th, really is kind of like the anchor. It's like the back end anchor of Filipino American History Month, where on October 18th, we celebrate 1587 when the Filipinos first arrived in Morro Bay. And then October 25th, Larry Itliong's birthday toward the end of the month. And then when Halloween comes, you know why you're going trick-or-treating dressed up like Larry Itliong. Because, you're ready for it as a way to say goodbye to Filipino American History Month once and for all. Oh, not once and for all. For the year. For the year. When truth is, however, every day is History Month, right? So, Emil Guillermo here. As I said, this is show number 166. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with me. And, we ask the question, what does an Asian American think? You might have seen this in the news. That the FBI stats, the new hate crime stats, and what do you think? What do you think the new hate crime stats show? The new hate crime stats show that there's a lot of hate out there. And that's why I thought, it would be a good idea right now to bring on Daniel Gonzales. Hi, Dan.
On such a pleasant subject.
Yeah, well, Professor Dan, this is important because we find ourselves at this point where, it's after it's sometime after the Atlanta, right? Atlanta happened in March of this year, right? So we're about 7 months, almost a half a year after. We're dealing with still the China flu scapegoating and how Asian Americans by Stop AAPI Hate. There's like 9,000 instances, and now we have this document, right? A real document that says, "Hey, there's let's see, where's that document? New FBI hate crime stats: over 1,000 more offenses in 2020 than 2019, and anti-Asian attacks are up 73%." So, what can you say? Is this a more confirmation that the evidence that is somewhat anecdotal in, say, some of these community-based projects like Stop AAPI Hate, and even as people go over journalistic records and citations in newspapers, reports in newspapers, is this just more confirmation, these FBI stats? How do you see it?
Yeah, sure. I think it's probably a greater degree of accuracy in reporting. I think people are more willing to report now, but there are less violent actions, perhaps. I really dislike using the term microaggressions, but
Yeah.
aggressions, acts of aggression towards Asians, and the worrisome thing is that we're not talking about a small group of people with the willingness to commit these aggressions against Asians. It could be anybody.
Yeah. Anybody. Yeah. There's no one particular group. But you know what I was struck by was just the sheer number. The FBI report
Yes, yes.
8,263 hate crime offenses in 2020, with the majority having links to racial biases. And this is according to, they amended their 2020 statistics. The
Hmm.
number of Asian hate crimes were 279 hate crimes anti-Asian, and that's 73% up from 2019. So
Yeah,
that's a lot. I mean, the percentage spike, but get this, 2,871 hate crimes were anti-black or African American, and that's up 45.5%. And anti-Semitic attacks actually decreased. So between blacks and Asians, we got something in common.
we always have.
Yeah. I mean,
It's just that most Asians, until fairly recently, I would say that most Asians did not want to recognize that.
yeah.
I think part of that is anti-black racial animus from Asians towards blacks, whether it qualifies as racism or simple prejudice, lower level of antagonism, perhaps.
Yeah.
But it's fact that many Asian groups have a large percentage of people who are very anti-black, and that also, I think, explains a bit of the rationale for those Asian ethnic groups that supported Trump in substantial numbers. Once again, it's a minority of their total population, but still substantial and therefore worrisome figures. And I think I've stated before on your programs that between 2016 to 2020, for our own ethnic group, for Filipino Americans, it went up after 5 years. Okay, if you include the period when Mr. Trump announced that he was running for presidency, and he started being openly racist, most pointedly against Latinx and Mexican American people. And Filipinos supported him 27%. 2020, when we got 4 more years of that, 34%. 34%. And so while we're celebrating, Filipino American History Month, I want that noted as well.
Yeah. Well,
That's part of our history.
so what should we do with these stats that have come out now? I mean, it's confirmation. It means that if we, it means people can't just sort of, you know,
Yeah, they can't dismiss it. They can't dismiss the fact that it occurs. Earlier I said that it's probably more accurate. I still think that this is probably disproportionately low representation of the reality. I just think unless the violence is pretty serious, I think that it's still underreported.
yeah. Underreporting is always the issue with these kind of stats, but at least we know that if you feel fear, if you feel a little uneasiness about going out in the community, it's not in your head.
That's right.
It's existing.
That's right. Well, then the problem is how do we deal with this? And it's not just how do we deal with the statistics, it's how do we deal with the fact that we could be set upon by anyone, and it goes across racial boundaries, and hell, you might even see Asian on Asian stuff, um, with the kind of people that still want to support Trump and still want to support the Republican Party despite all of the evidence of their willingness to use the means that they customarily allege against the left and against organizations that they see as leftist organizations, even if they aren't. I mean, I don't consider, for example, the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. I don't see that as a leftist organization. Do you?
No,
Yeah,
yeah.
but people dismiss it and criticize it as though it is a leftist organization.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
hold on a second, Dan. I want to fix something here. Don't speak here. I'm trying to figure out how. Okay, now it's working. I had to figure out how to get the split screen on.
Oh,
So now we got the split screen. So now it shows that I could be listening to you. All right. So, all right. So Dan, moving on. We have these stats. I know
yep,
that you're doing some work in the Central Valley, and you've been talking to Central American or Central Valley Asian American groups that are interested in social justice. And
yes,
one of the things you've been talking about is how to bring people together. Disparate,
yes,
different groups. I mean, in the Central Valley, you have Hmong, Cambodian, Chinese,
yep.
Vietnamese, Filipino. How do you
Mhm.
bring them all together? How do you tell them that Asian American as a term is inclusive?
Right. Well, they don't have a problem with understanding Asian American as inclusive. They have a problem with whether or not there's enough identification of the diversity under the rubric Asian American. In other words, does our community get recognized as an element of this larger penumbral term, right? Asian American. That's one of the issues. That's one of their issues. And I mentioned that when we started ethnic studies, we wanted third world studies. When we started ethnic studies, three groups were the easily identified populations of Asians in the United States at the time. And what people don't realize is that the Japanese American community was the largest Asian population in the late 60s and early 70s. But the opening of the doors in 1965 with immigration reform would start realizing a very rapid increase in two groups, right? Filipinos and Chinese. And by 1971, 72, it was clear that because of immigration reform and this deluge, right, of influx of Chinese and Filipino immigrants, that those two groups were going to become supernumerary and were going to eclipse the Japanese Americans as larger Asian populations. Now, so the three groups were recognized immediately as under the rubric of Asian American. But some of us were looking down to the future, right? Or up to the future, I guess is better.
Yeah.
And one of those things that we were looking at was what's going to happen when the U.S. eventually leaves Southeast Asia, at least militarily. Okay, because those kinds of negotiations were going on. They weren't going well,
Yeah.
but it was easily imaginable that an end to the commitment by the United States to Vietnam, particularly, and it was much broader than that, but to Vietnam particularly, was going to end soon. So what's going to happen? And my scenario was I was an international relations major, but these activities were going on while I was in law school. But, once you're an IR major, you're an IR major for the rest of your life. You're always watching international politics. And I thought, well, we're going to get a lot of Southeast Asian refugees beginning with the Vietnamese.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's going to change things. That's going to change
Exactly.
things. And
then the Korean population grew. That increased. Okay. So you had Vietnamese, Koreans were already increasing, but you were also going to get Cambodians.
Right. Cambodians. Right.
You're going to get Lao, right? So when you looked at Southeast Asia, you had to see who all those neighboring countries were, right? Because they were all affected by the Vietnam War.
I have to say, I did not. I'm born and raised San Francisco, Asian American, Filipino. I knew the Chinese, knew the Japanese. They were the main groups. Japantown, Chinatown.
Yeah, in San Francisco, Chinese, though, were supernumerary, and the Japanese presence was pretty light.
But my point is, it wasn't until I came to the Central Valley that I noticed the Cambodian, the Hmong,
the
Vietnamese,
all
of them together, and very few Chinese, or the Chinese weren't as numerous in say the Central Valley. The Japanese were kind of like moving beyond the Central Valley, and the Filipinos were they were there, but the traditional groups weren't as strong. And then, of course, we can't forget the South Asians, because there's a large contingent of Sikh, a large contingent of Indian. It is really a different kind of Asian America when you
absolutely
the Central Valley of California.
Absolutely.
And then when you consider all of California, especially now, and I bring this up because you also have a political interest. Orange County. It had been a Republican stronghold a long time. Then it became Democrat for a brief.
We had a colloquial term for Orange County. It was white on rice.
White on rice. Yeah.
And it was very apt when Asians said that, especially the people from LA County.
Yeah. Well, the thing that happened, of course, within the last couple of cycles, the Democrats had some control there, and then it was taken over by two female Republicans, Asian Americans. And now some challengers have come up, Asian Americans, and they don't seem to be making much of a dent in Orange County. It seems like the conservative foothold in Orange County has emerged, and guess what? It is Asian and not white.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that tell you, Professor? It's
who's
scary.
Yeah. Who's
because people are thinking, oh, we're going to flip it back. We're going to flip back Orange County. And there's some really great candidates on the Democratic side in Orange County, and they are being out fundraised. And the women conservatives, who I believe are Korean and Vietnamese, they are doing their best to they essentially channel Kevin McCarthy and Devin Nunes, right?
Yep.
And they are Trumpers to the core. They know how to play modern Republican politics, which is to essentially buy into the big lie.
Yeah, well, a lot of this has to do with class too.
Yeah.
Class, and then what I call referential racialism. Okay.
Well, wait a minute. Class? Are you saying that just if you had money, it's okay to buy into the big lie?
Well, a lot of people who, class is a major divider within our own communities. Among Filipinos as well as anybody else, and sometimes it's not actual class position. Sometimes it's wannabe class position. So
Oh,
people want to ascend, right, in terms of their socioeconomic status, and so people imagine themselves capable of rising even further than their current station. And
so
that's a common belief among Asians, and particularly Asian immigrant populations. I think it's I, don't, I haven't seen enough research, and I haven't done it myself, but I haven't seen enough research on how second generation
so
and
in
third
other words,
generation.
people aren't being asses; they're just being aspirational. And
Oh,
which is,
ooh.
I just think no. I mean,
Not according to Eddie Glad, our great professor from Princeton, your
well,
enemy school. Yeah.
I just think that it is class. I see that a lot, and I see people saying, "Well, this is the way," and you can also say it could be a little bit of colonial thinking. This is the
Absolutely.
way. This is the way the white colonizer thinks. I want to be like him. I want to be the manager like him. I want to be, I want to rise like
Well,
him.
we're also engaged in small business and medium-sized businesses a lot. In certain ethnic groups more than others.
Yeah,
I think our other Southeast Asian cousins are far more engaged in small business, medium-sized business than Filipinos are, for example. The South Asians, Indians, Punjabis, right,
yeah,
Sikhs, heavily engaged in
yeah.
not just small business, but in large scale. I mean, the first interactions that I had with South Asians in San Francisco was in 1970s, and they were buying up. This is in San Francisco now. They
Sure,
were
sure.
buying up Tenderloin and South of Market properties
Well, of
and running
course.
them. We call them flop houses.
Well, the thing is, if you look at the traditional South Asian legacy businesses, if you are a Patel, you are a
Yeah.
hotel owner, and I know a few Patels myself
Yeah.
who are sitting on properties. They buy a property in a terrible area, and that
Yep.
terrible area becomes gentrified over 10, 20, 30 years, and suddenly they're sitting
Oh,
on.
they were outstanding in terms of defending their interests, even when they were running flop houses. These are we called flop houses the places that were undercoded, right? In other words, they should have been cited for code failures, but they weren't, and so we were getting on a weekly basis. Just the office where I was clerking, we were getting at least 3 or 4 complaints going in both directions. People who were defendants because landlords were saying you're not paying your rent, and they did not pay their rent because under recent court decisions and new laws, new legislation being passed in the early and mid 70s, tenants' rights were increasing.
Right.
Okay, and so they couldn't be evicted so easily as they were previously. And it would take me days to explain the kinds of avoidances, right?
All
That
right.
that the landlords had, and they created shell companies, right? So
Well,
that when you try to attack the landlord, you're attacking really a middle management company, and then you have to find out who the owners are,
yeah.
and many frequently leftist, near socialist, liberal, and progressive lawyers, well known now as civil rights lawyers, right, were the actual owners of some of these flop houses. And I was thinking, well, this is not going to go well if we go public. And
Well,
so I
yeah.
had to come up with all kinds of schemes to try and get around. I used the public issue as the possibility. I might turn this over to Emil Guillermo.
Yeah.
Because you were still working TV in the city.
Well, this is part of the diversity and the growth and the evolution of a community. Now, to get back to what you were saying about the Central Valley Asian Americans,
Yeah, they
build a case
yeah,
that
they're community service. They're community service organizations. So they're very. I don't want to say progressive or liberal, but they're certainly not conservative. They're certainly in tune with the reality of the experiences of their people. They're very conscious of the active right within their community and its association with Trumpism and everything else. And the reason they're sensitive to that is because the right is very strong in the Central Valley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Even among Asians, because
Yeah,
there are Indian landowners, right?
sure,
Farmers.
sure. The Central Valley is the red part of the blue state, as I like to
Yes,
call it.
yes.
And it's true that the Asian Americans are on that political side.
Yeah, they're
So
owners. They're owners. They're warehouse people. They're distributors, right? And so, and at the least, they're small business owners. 20 years ago, I was traveling on 99 north of Sacramento, and I went to stop to get some gas, and my kids came back to the car, and they had moi, yeah, apricot pits, yeah.
yeah.
And I was really confused. I said, "What? They got moi at this gas station?" And I said, "Where'd you get that?" And they said, "That store right over there." And adjacent to the gas station, across their parking lot, was this green building, and it was a small grocery store. Went in there, and it was Hmong owned.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
the Hmong, they're the up and coming ones, and they have really been helped by the success of one person in particular, and that is Suni Lee, the Olympian.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I said during the time when she won the gold medal in the Olympics, I said, watch out, she's going to be the most watchable Asian American. And I'm just flipping around. I wasn't I wasn't trying to watch this particular show on television, but there it was, Dancing with the Stars. She's dancing, and she's mid-pack and Dancing with the Stars, but she's not a bad dancer. She's athletic. She's attractive. All of 18, and she should be going to school, right? She's I mean, technically speaking, she's
Okay, Dad.
she's a freshman at Auburn.
You're falling into
Here she is on Dancing with the Stars.
our
And also,
father trap. Yeah, Asian father trap.
but also because of the new rules and the new
Yeah.
NCAA rules. I mean, she can take money for her pictures of her doing things. So,
And isn't it about time, right?
it is about time. I was just
Way
thinking,
overdue.
yeah, I was just thinking that I think Suni Lee is really next to the Squid Game folks and the Korean guys, the boy bands.
BTS, man, BTS, dude.
Suni Lee is like, she is. I don't want to say she's putting Asians on the map, but definitely she's part of that young force of Asians. I mean, they're not looking at you and me, but they're looking at, BTS. They're looking at, at her. They're looking at.
Yeah, no, the whole thing together. The whole thing together. We're more represented across the board now.
Yeah,
Okay.
and do you think it's a big deal? I mean, look, we had we got the Kung Fu movie, and that's supposed to put us on the map. We thought, oh, well, we can't do it on Asian, Crazy Rich Asians alone. We can't do it on Fresh Off the Boat alone. But as you said, taken all together, I guess you could say it's a good time to be Asian American, right?
Well, yeah, but I kind of remember when Bruce Lee was it. He was still alive,
Mhm.
and everybody was trying to do kung fu.
Yeah, yeah.
It had people made fun of it because they quickly learned that not every Asian male was a kung fu artist or even familiar with how to fight in any form. Okay, and so it wasn't easy to overcome the most racist statement about Asian males that I heard frequently in those days, and that was, "Don't worry about it, man. They could only fight when there's like 10 of them. When the ratio's 10-1 or something like that. They won't fight." And what happened was there was a formation of very serious gangs as a result. What people don't understand is these things that they call gangs that can eventually become very antisocial, right, and even criminal in some respects. start out as a defense mechanism.
Yeah. Well, you talk about gangs. One of the next things on my list, I want to talk about Chinatown, 1871. It
Oh
just,
boy.
well, because the root of that was the social organization in Chinatown,
Yeah.
which were the Tongs. The
Yes.
Tongs, the ruling Tongs, Asian men, Chinese, came
Yep.
to America mostly, and this is familiar because it was the same pattern as for Filipinos. They came as mostly workers. They were bachelors, so they're more men than women. They
Mm-hmm.
gambled, they drank. You know, the Tongs ran houses of prostitution, and um, that was their place. And the massacre took place in 1871 when there was a perception that a rich white rancher and maybe a white cop were were killed
Mm-hmm.
due to something that was done by the Chinese there. And so 500 white and Latino, or I believe Mexican American, Mexican descent uh, folks, 500 of them descended onto Chinatown, and they they began what is known as the Massacre of 1871, striking people, killing people, hanging people, not
Sure.
necessarily in that order.
And
So,
not without irony, along a street that was called Calle de Negros,
oh yeah,
a Negro alley, right?
yeah. So I mean, why is it that we hear about Chinatown 1871? I've heard it now at least, oh, I don't know. I've heard it more in the last year than I had in, say, 10, 15 years previous.
Well, okay, Tulsa, right?
Oh, yeah, Tulsa. Yep.
Tulsa. So last year, earlier this year, people were talking about Tulsa. There was a and so for a lot of Americans of all colors, right,
Yep.
this kind of massacre was something new. I mean, it was extreme,
Right.
right? It was never people weren't held accountable, okay, and so this whole mess of police killings,
Mm.
especially questionable and even proven criminal police killings, plus the history of massacres, gives rise to some curiosity about how other people fared in American society. And so Asians can come forward with these kinds of instances, and this was one of the worst. Okay,
Yeah.
but there was also lynchings in Wyoming.
Yeah. Well,
There was also Truckee. Chinese were driven out of Truckee up by Lake Tahoe,
yeah,
and they had settled there because they had built, the west end of the Transcontinental Railroad.
sure. And,
And so all along the Transcontinental Railroad, you had small settlements of Chinese trying to do small business. Um, Smaller groups, but Chinese sheep herders in Northern California, right? There are plaques, historical plaques that commemorate all over Northern California battles between cattlemen and sheep herders and timber people,
yeah,
and what you don't realize is that some of the sheep herders were Chinese, right?
yeah,
People don't readily think that Chinese immigrants can become cowboys, and that's what I liked about some of the new treatments on television. One of my favorite TV shows is Warrior, right?
yeah. Well, they were here in the West, right?
Yes, yeah,
1850s, 1849 for the gold
yeah,
rush,
yep,
1869 the trains. They were
sure.
here at the time, and they weren't like all like pencil neck geeks with pencil protectors and carrying computers. I
Yeah,
mean,
the people have a hard time seeing Chinese as cowboys, right? But
yeah,
as a matter of fact, they were, and in fact, there were Chinese who were selling horses to both sides during the Civil War. They
they
were
were.
breaking horses and selling to both the North and the South during the Civil War. Okay, so they had to know how to break horses, right? They had to know where to contact these people, and they sure as hell had to protect their interests, and that meant that they had to be fully armed and capable of doing what anybody else, was doing in a time of war to make trade.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned the Chinatown Massacre of 1871 because it was a special, it happened on October 24th. It seemed like a lot of these things happened around the same time, October. We had in 1920, and, they were, history repeating sort of along the same time, pure coincidence, but 1929 in October, anti Filipino riots in Exeter anti.
That's right. Yeah, prior to the Watsonville riots by a few months. Yeah.
Yeah, and there. The thing is that it all seems to be they're all unique events, individual events, but sometimes you take the hate together and you see, wow, hate here, hate here, hate here, and it just seems to be like it's all cut from the same cloth. This hate against the fear of Asians taking jobs. In the case of the Filipinos, taking jobs and women, and hence anti-miscegenation laws, and it just seems to be a continuing pattern and theme in our history.
Yeah, yeah. I just we got to be careful with you use the word taking Filipino taking white women. I don't know if it was all like kabay, right? That they were kidnapping women, but they were definitely relating and fraternizing across the line, or across the racial line, and marrying and successfully challenging. Right.
What
the real Dad case.
Yeah, what I mean by taking women, I mean they were.
That's the way they were seen.
Yeah, not literally kidnapping, but they were seen as it was a point of jealousy.
And, yeah.
And I never would have considered the word jealousy until I saw it, until I was talking or I heard it said by Professor Ron Takaki of the late professor from UC Berkeley. And he pointed to the idea of jealousies as the main motivator of the animus that was felt toward Asian Americans, specifically Filipinos. Jealousy.
Yeah, he was kind of Dr. Takaki was a Bolasanist, right? And by that I mean he relied heavily on the depiction of the Filipino American experience from Carlos Bolasan's perspective. In his book, America is in the Heart, and related stories and some of his letters. So that's going to be the kind of perspective that Dr. Takaki would come from. And I criticized it mildly, right, as victimological. In other words, he made us look like we couldn't, Bulasan made it look like we're eternal victims. We're perpetual victims, right? And
I mean, if you were able to, are you victimized if you marry cross race lines and marry as a Filipino, marry a white person?
Sure. When we're looking at it from a legal perspective, absolutely. If you look at it from a legal perspective, those barriers were constitutional. I mean, they were supported by the Constitution, in spite of the fact, right, that Plessy versus Ferguson, right, 1896, right, decided that, well, not in spite of, but it was supported by that theory, right, that the racial inferiority is here, it's real, and we can classify people differently, even though they share a common convenience, right? Riding on the buses and public transports, we can tell them where to sit. Okay.
Because Plessy versus Ferguson was essentially separate but equal, right?
Yes, that was the key.
We're separate, but we're equal, but we're separate.
So even though the so-called separate but equal schools had no running water, had no restrooms, had no books, right? And we're talking about, in some cases, there were Chinese who were forced to attend black schools outside the city limits, in all throughout the South.
because they were seen basically as colored,
Yes,
the Chinese.
they were all generalized together. Yes, and that's another thing that more recent immigrant generations um, either don't know or readily dismiss as something that's historical and it doesn't really apply to us. Well, they can't do that anymore. Yeah, well, they can do it. They can deny anything because they're capable of denying anything. The last 4 years is really ridiculous. I mean, it's a period that our generation and younger are going to have to answer for because the kids that are coming up now, they see this stuff as plain as day,
Yeah,
right? And
it's obvious to people coming up now. The older people are trying to kind of justify or trying to rationalize, and the young
yeah.
people say, "Hey, well, why are you taking that racism?" Hey, Dan, in the time remaining, I want to ask you about the current political climate because
Oh.
it doesn't look that good. I mean, if you take the idea that okay,
Emil Amok, a master of understatement.
well, I want to
Doesn't
give
look that
Biden,
good.
I want to give Biden the benefit of the doubt, but here we have Biden trying to, he's got this infrastructure package that could have been as much as 6 trillion. It's now down to about less than 2 trillion, like
Yeah.
one and a half, something like that. So, like, what are we? Like, we started out with this big gift, like a massive Christmas gift, and now all we're getting is like a pair of socks. We might get a pair and a tie. Maybe we'll
An
get a
ugly
tie.
tie, yeah, an ugly tie that you'll never wear.
And yeah, a tie you'll never wear. And
Here's
socks
here's
you'll wear
here's one
again.
for donation. Yeah.
So I mean, so where are we? I mean, I know that Pelosi's trying to get together the Democrats. I know
Joe
Pelosi's
Biden. Joe Biden. I can't get in his head. Okay, but he said I'm going to bring everybody together. All right. Now, who said that before? The guy that he was vice president under said that before. He said I'm going to bring everybody together. Okay. Now,
he could.
real politics. Real politics is, dude. Do you know you're black? Even though you're only half black, you're black, dude. You know, and American society, okay, a large percentage of Americans aren't going to listen to a black man saying we're going to bring everybody together. They're going to see you as anathema. You know, you're a contradiction. You're a contradiction to the notion of America the way white people see it, particularly white Christian evangelicals. Now, is there a division between and among Christian evangelicals? There is. Okay, there's the Christ is Love group, and there's Christ would be kicking ass on people of color group, right? And getting rid of them and keeping them out of the country, and letting them die and separating their kids from parents. That's who they are, and that's a substantial percentage of. I don't screw American voters. Even if they don't vote, these are the kind of people that are willing to do violence against us.
So
Okay,
how are we going to cross this bridge, or is there common ground that we can stop fighting each other in this in this kind of political environment? Because
race is really incredibly difficult to address. Okay, because of people belief systems. Okay, if you accept that many Americans feel that this country was established to be a country of white supremacy. Okay? They didn't use those terms, but they assumed that we made this country great. They didn't read, you know, X. Kennedy's book on, you know,
well, I just think where we
stamped
are
from the
now
beginning.
to try to find some kind of common ground. The only thing that I see that might be common ground, the conservatives adopt it, but the liberals want to shy away from it. And
And what's
that
that?
animals, kindness and compassion to animals. The conservatives are all about, it seems, they want to they see animal rights and see it as they've made it their issue lately. I'm just saying, check out conservative media as of late, and you'll see them all over uh, Dr. Fauci and NIH and these experiments at NIH, and that is something that because my wife works for PETA, I'm I see this and I say, wow, the right is all over this, and the left, they want to back Fauci, so they're backing off. And so an opportunity for common ground gets lost because, once again, politics keeps them apart. But I see that it could, because normally it's not, the right embracing their pets and the left embracing their pets. It could be a way to bring people together. Is that too naive for you?
No, it's not naive at all. But because the reality is that people on the right do care very frequently more about animals than they do about people.
Well, that's true. That's true.
You know, and so my wife comments on it all the time when there's donations, right, for pet shelters and adopting dogs and cats, animals and all that. But then it comes the science and the use of animals, experimentation, which is it's being stopped these days. There's less and less of that.
But yeah, there is. But this was an example of a boondoggle at NIH. The conservatives are all over it. Like, look, why is this happening? Peter's been talking about it for years, and the thing is, the left, they're not even going there because they've got other issues right now to deal with. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I think the right, for many on the right, that issue is a real issue. Okay, but they also are looking for some kind of moral ground to stand on.
Oh yeah, but they're looking for something because
Yeah,
Trump isn't moral ground. Trump is just pure venal
yeah.
at all costs, no morals. And so yeah, I mean, and that's just the truth. I mean, the big
Yeah.
lie is the big lie.
Well, there was a bigger lie, and the biggest lie was white supremacy.
Oh yeah.
Now, people weren't talking. They weren't even using the phrase white supremacy 2 years ago. Even
Right.
during the Trump era, they were not using the phrase white supremacy, right? Academics and some commentators started to use the phrase when Charlottesville happened.
Yeah.
And it was really obvious that there were brown shirts, marching with torches. And who are they imitating? They're imitating the early stages of the development of the Nazi Party, right? Under Hitler, right? Before Kristallnacht and all of the massacre of Jews, and not only Jews but Poles, right? Warsaw and all the rest of that, right? And here these guys are saying these are our heroes. We want they're heroic because they understood how to get rid of people that are unwanted in American society, and so they're acting as though that's a legitimate position to take, and hardly any criticism of them, except from the left. Okay.
Well, they needed some time to figure out what was being I mean, and then you had all these right wing people from Iowa saying, preaching it like the gospel, and
Well,
and then it became a thing where people started. I mean, because I have to admit too that I can't recall people really talking so openly about white supremacy
it's
until
not until
Trump. It is only with Trump.
That's right.
2016, 2017, that we began to see, people talking about white supremacy for real. Southern Poverty Law Center fighting white supremacy for real.
Even in the ethnic studies context, people were using the term white privilege.
Ah, yeah.
Okay, as a criticism, right? They're saying, white people don't understand that they have privilege, right? That others, and a lot of working class white people said, "Show me my privilege. I'm working my ass off, and I'm making $9 an hour. I can't afford shit. Gas prices going up, and you can show me my privilege." And
That's
my
your
answer to them is, do you have to worry about how the cop is going to treat you when you see that light go on behind you?
see. I was asking. I was going to ask, is that your white accent? And clearly, it was your white accent. I look. I know about the. I mean, white privilege. It's now all in our face, and race is difficult. And look, we only have a couple more. Uh, a few more minutes left.
It's all yours, man.
But tell me, what do you think about what do you think about Dave Chappelle and the trans?
Oh.
Because he first of all, have you seen his special?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing, and if you watch the whole thing, it ain't that bad.
It's not that bad. And he
No,
has
it ain't that bad.
the
It's
crowning
it's
story is about a trans woman
it was
who,
a friend of his.
yeah, I mean, I don't see why there's any reason why anyone should feel like he's anti-trans. He says some things. Maybe his belief system is that I don't even know what.
Well, he says things that were critical of the way some trans people look, right? He says, like, he got one really quick line, like, yeah, I was scanning the crowd looking for Adam's apples and a little bit of shadow beard, and he got laughs.
Yeah,
He got laughs. Now it is true, right? That some trans people, um, I think willingly want to look different.
yeah,
Okay. On the other hand, they may be undergoing right the change, and so this is an incidental period in their lives, and I think that's on the line, and I think he does cross the line.
yeah. But here's the thing, Dan. It's like you don't shoot the jester, you shoot the king. He's not the king, he's the jester. Jesters are not policymakers. They may be arbiters of taste and speech on one level, but the people who are dangerous are the policymakers who really harbor these ideas either publicly or privately. And I don't see, I mean, maybe it's a good activist exercise to get alarmed by Chappelle, but it is maybe more a call for more speech and debate, less censorship, but definitely more speech and debate, more engagement,
Right.
not censorship. And ultimately, I think that's where Chappelle, he's a provocateur.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and certainly he's getting people to, and so is Netflix getting people to see his special. But I saw it the first week it came out, and I was wondering, well, what's this about? I also like Hannah Gadsby. I like Hannah Gadsby a lot. And I just think that Netflix is opening itself up to well, they better have a lot more trans comedy specials in the coming year. You know,
Yeah.
and I know some good trans comics. I mean, you see them on. There's a guy named Robin Tran who's really funny. Yeah, Vietnamese, I think, Asian
That's
American.
not even fair that his last name is Trent.
I know his last name is Tran. I think I don't think he was. I mean, he popped up on my Twitter feed. Very funny guy. I think it's an opportunity for him, you know, other trans people. But I think the more speech, the better. And if I would be more alarmed if Dave Chappelle was a member of the House of Representatives or some kind of policymaker or some kind of some person who had some kind of power to create law. He has the power to influence public opinion, but this is where people should come together. And his latest thing is we'll talk in a place and time that I come up with. You got to first see my special and then let me choose the place and choose the time we can talk. I don't find that so offensive. I don't find it disingenuous. I find it that he's trying to protect himself. He's a public figure. There's a lot of people out there who would do dangerous things um, in overreaction to
Sure.
what
And
he's.
and the general environment, as you were saying earlier, right? It's not just general political environment; it's a general social environment.
Yeah,
It's really pretty bad. I mean, the freeway shootings, road rage
yeah,
examples, and just people acting up at board of education meetings.
yeah. Well,
You
look,
know,
Dan, just to get back to the thing we started off with at the very beginning of the conversation after we talked about Larry Itliong. 8,263 hate crime offenses in 2020. That's what
hmm
the FBI's amended stats show. And 2,871 were anti black, and that was up from 45.5%. And anti Asian was up 73%. But the total number of anti Asian hate compared to anti black, 279 anti Asian, which I know we're not as numerous as blacks, but
that's
279.
pretty. Yeah, the ratio is smaller. Yeah.
And so, but still, not to take away from the larger idea that there's reason to be fearful of people out there. As much as we like to embrace openly, I don't know.
Well, okay. I'll tell you what. In When the hate crimes started being reported more regularly, because some of them were quite ugly, not just people getting pushed over in the street and elders dying, but the Filipino man that was slashed on a New York subway, right?
Right,
Uh,
right.
that really made me much more fearful, because of copycat possibilities, and we got a lot of people taking public transportation, and you're largely defenseless in those circumstances unless you're trained, unless you practice self defense. And what I was concerned about was the first thing that I did was look for Asian owned gun stores. Okay, and then I went to look and I called and I said, hey. How's it going in terms of sales? They go, oh man, there's all kinds of Asians coming in. And then I was checking with another friend of mine. And I said, hey, and this guy's a lefty, a well-known lefty from the peace and freedom days, and anti-Marcos and all that stuff. And he said, yeah, I'm getting some range practice in.
Uh-oh.
And so I said, really? I said, well, the local range, indoor range shut down, unfortunately. And where do you shoot? And he goes, well, I go to the East Bay, and there's a nice range up there. And I said, yeah, but it's right next to, an area that is heavily populated by right wing white folks. They've been cross burnings and stuff, right, in that area in front of Asian businesses. And he goes, yeah, well, but if you go to the gun range, a lot of Asians. That's what he said. He said, a lot of Asians. So, there is a masculinist element, right, in our cultures. And this cuts across ethnic boundaries, right?
Yeah.
There's a masculinist element. And then you also have to look at the fact that many of the people, the refugee populations that we were talking about earlier that heavily populate the Central Valley, right, they're from the war experience. Okay? And so their elders are very familiar with the use of firearms.
Yeah. See,
Okay?
that's the thing. Me, I have to go with my baston.
Oh,
My,
your stick. You got a stick.
stick. My
You
stick.
got your solo baston. Oh, that's right. You trained a little bit, huh?
No, no, no. But I did. I have seen a few videos.
No. You got to do better than that, bro.
I have seen a few videos.
There are so many people that you could train with. It'd be good for you, dude.
Oh no! I like doing that. I like doing that stuff. And it is good. It is good. But so look, Dan. One last word on Facebook. I've got Facebook on.
Oh, man.
I mean, we don't have to get into it right now too much, but we are on Facebook.
Yes, we are.
on Twitter. We're also
Yes.
on YouTube. But I'd like to think we are the antidote to all the bad things in Facebook. People say don't vax. We say vax. Like today, we're saying children 5 to 11. By next week, you can go vax. Please go get vax.
Backs up.
People say, people have disinformation on their channel. Hey, I'll give you the right information. Larry
Uh,
Itliong Day, October 25th. Hey,
yeah.
I'll give you the FBI stats. I'll talk about the Chinatown 1871 massacre, different from the San Francisco Chinatown 1877 massacre. We'll talk about all sorts. We'll give you the good information here. We are the antidote to the bad Facebook.
We'll give you accurate information as we know it, okay? And we will try and treat it fairly and balance what we tell you, right, against what's going on generally in the society. And much of that is based on misinformation, okay?
Yeah.
When Trumpers, particularly people in office, members of Congress, started saying things that they clearly mimicked Russian propaganda.
Oh yeah.
And so a few people who were daring enough, right, including a few, quote, former intelligence officers, unquote, right? The reason I put that in quotes is because no such thing as former. Okay. Once they've been, they are. Who said Trump is a Russian agent. He just came around and said it because he was functioning in every way in favor of the Russians, and he was acting in a manner completely consistent with Russian propaganda, right? And so people reacted in horror to that and said, wow, these people are crazy. They're leftists, they're communists, blah, 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 blah. No. If you parallel his statements and the statements of his supporters, right, particularly, I can't, Mo Brooks, that guy, right? Who's the guy from Wisconsin? Johnson from Wisconsin. I mean, those guys, they're saying stuff it's all attributable to the Russians, right? I'm an international relations major. Yes, it was only my BA, but, and it was double major with poli-sci. But it was, I still do it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that we both have connections with people who have been former intelligence officers. And those are always interesting discussions. We don't bring it up normally because, their security clearances are gone. They're all normal people now. But I appreciate their perspectives on what's happening. Yeah. And the thing that scares me most about the Trump era is that we're preoccupied with the machinations of that craziness, and we're not looking at the world stage. The only time we react on the world stage is when somebody does something aggressive, like when people pay attention to the fact that the Chinese got all kinds of ships rolling around in the South China Sea, and they're saying, look at your map. It says South China Sea. It belongs to us, man. We can do whatever we want. So they're building airstrips down there, doing all kinds of stuff. Docking facilities, for large ships. What? Okay. We're not paying attention.
We aren't paying attention to the global stage and those little areas that they're in the South China or the West Philippine Sea.
There you go.
That China is building on. They're like little bumps in the water, essentially. And they've had to really kind of like do major reclamation projects. But look, here's the thing that the problem where we are now is we don't put enough stock in the truth. We don't put, I mean, the New York Times did a great story about Montana and about how some Chamber of Commerce, innocent Chamber of Commerce people wanted to make some federal heritage society parts of, apply to Montana and to bring in tourism. And some people in a not in my backyard type of move came up with out of whole cloth, created an anti-movement, an anti this heritage area designation thing. They made it up to based on lies. saying that, well, if that heritage designation goes through, you won't be able to use manure. You won't be able to you won't be able to drill for
Yeah.
water. You won't be able to do, it's like heritage, a heritage area, forget it. And all they were trying to do is just trying to say, oh, Montana, special place, come visit it. Come visit this federal heritage area. And here are federal dollars that are used to kind of like create little posters and, little sticks that you stick
Well,
up.
what is it? What were they concerned with? Because this is
It was,
getting kind of close to critical race theory.
well, the people were just lying,
Yeah, but
falsehood.
what were they concerned with? They got to be blocking it for a reason, and
Well,
it can't just be we don't want to. We don't want this place to be seen as historical.
it was a NIMBY, not in my backyard kind of thing, but it was all driven by falsehoods that misrepresented the true nature of what the the plan was about. And so,
They saw it as a federal takeover,
well,
right? Yeah.
essentially, right? I mean, and this is the thing about the common the common discourse now.
I'll tell you what. Don't pick up the Social Security check. Tell you
Every
what.
everything.
Don't use any of the facilities, right? Screw the freeway. Yeah, we're going to build infrastructure, but you can't use it.
Well, see, here's the thing. This thing with the infrastructure, boy, to strip it down from 6 trillion to like less than 2 trillion, like 1.5 trillion, it's ridiculous. We need this
Yeah, no kidding.
shore up. America's falling apart, and
Yes, it is, and it has been.
yeah, and it's not just falling apart because the people aren't smart. Although in that Montana piece of the New York Times, they talked about people being uneducable because they were locked in, intransigent, on their positions and unable to be persuaded otherwise. And that's a dangerous, dangerous thing. And
Okay.
it's why you got to do stuff like
Yeah.
this so
Yeah.
that you have
Well,
alternative.
but they have to. People have to be willing to tune in. They have to be willing to think.
Oh yeah,
That what we're saying has some value. Even to question whether or not it's accurate.
well,
If they're
yeah,
willing to take one step and Google the damn thing, or Yahoo the damn thing, and to check us on our facts,
well, yeah,
yeah,
of course,
that would be a good thing. They don't want to do that.
yeah. Well,
Okay, so they're right. They're uneducable. The second session of my class is educate the educable. So it's the other side of that coin.
well, what happens is that people just say, okay, well, I'll listen to the news because, and Rush Limbaugh used to say this, and this is what made people lazy. He would say, I will read this and talk about it so that you won't have to. So you just listen to me and believe what I say. That
That's
was
it.
that's the beginning of people saying, "Oh, Rush will do it. Okay, I'll give it up to him." And when people started saying, "Yeah, I'll do that," I mean, no one's saying, "I'll give it up to Emil. I'll let Emil think for me, and I'll think like Emil." Or they're not saying, "I'll think like Dan." Although I think because you're a professor, more people are thinking like Dan because of you, thanks to you. And
Well, you've also been a lecturer. You've also been a university lecturer
well,
on a couple of campuses.
that's true. I'm telling you that the idea that when Rush Limbaugh told the right, "Hey, this is the way you think. Tune
Yeah.
in to the show. I'll tell you how to think." That became the shortcut for, yeah, everything Rush says is true. And now Rush is gone. He was a little more entertaining than some of the other guys they have now, but
Tucker, your buddy Tucker.
the other guys are more. Yeah, I'm just saying this is the level of discourse, and what we hope to do by
Tucker, your buddy Tucker was hugging on the Hungarian.
yeah, well, he's not my buddy, but he say
That's
this.
not what he says.
Well, funny you say that. My wife is going to be on Tucker Carlson's show
Oh no!
tonight. Tonight, she's on Tucker.
Oh, what a coincidence! I got to put that in, man. I never watch that dude. I get upset.
Well, I get upset.
My wife tells me, look at have another hit of mezcal or whatever you got to do, but calm down, calm the hell down.
I agree. He's hard to take, but and so when my wife comes home, I make her. I'm at least for a couple of days, I make her sleep in the extra room, and then it just no, no, no.
That's so good.
Yeah. So
That's so good.
all right, Dan. Look,
That'd be just like Ozzy and Harriet. They had separate beds.
that's
You know,
right.
don't think anything about it. I mean, they weren't quarreling or anything.
Separate rooms, not just.
Okay. Well, that's a little extreme, but
All right, Dan Gonzales, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University. I appreciate you being here as always. You're always welcome on Emil Amok's Takeout. Thank you very much, and we look forward to your next visit soon. Maybe this week.
thank you. Thank you, sir. It's always a ball. Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
Thanks, Dan. There's Dan Gonzales, old friend of mine. No emphasis on old. That's just a coincidence. He's a good guy. I bring him in because he's a learned man, and like I said, he was there at the beginning of the College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University, when they essentially began ethnic studies, Asian American studies back in 1968. And, we talked about a lot of things today. Larry Itliong, we talked about the Chinese Massacre, 1871. We talked about Asian American. We talked about the hate crimes. Man, I'm telling you, those hate crime stats, look, they should just let people know it's for real. It's not an insignificant thing. And when they go up by 70 some percent, it's for real. Forget about the sheer number. The sheer number, you'll say, oh, well, it's not that many. Oh, yes, it is. I mean, it is that many. You're talking about, well, 8,263 hate crime offenses in 2020, with the majority of them having racial bias linked to them. But, 2871 had to do with anti-black, only 279 with anti-Asian. So you say, oh, well, they're not that many. No, 73% spike from 2019. That's significant. And then you talk about the hate crime victims, 11,975 hate crime victims in 2020, 84% of whom were individuals. I mean, these are significant numbers, and they're worthy to state and restate. It's not in our heads. The scapegoating of Asian Americans is real or was real, and the impact of all that scapegoating is real. Still. All right. Hey, I guess that's it for our show today. I want to thank Daniel Phil Gonzales. I want to thank you for showing up here on Emil Amok's Takeout. This is show number 166. If you're watching right now, it's because you're perusing on Twitter and you say, well, what is this guy Emil? He looks like he's wearing like doing play-by-play for the Gong Show. What's he? No, I'm in my Gong closet. This is Emil Amok's Takeout Live, number 166, where we just say, well, what does an Asian American think? WDAAAT. What that? And you can see the replays at amok.com. You can email me at Emil, E-M-I-L, at amok.com. Hey, follow me on Twitter. If you're on Twitter watching the show, hey, welcome on Twitter. An interesting little playback on Twitter. I actually like the Twitter playback, and I like the fact that I can just put it on there. And if you go to Twitter at Emil Amok, you just look at all the different shows and say, oh, here's the show. Here's number show 164, 163, 160. You can watch them and then see the rest of them at amok.com. See my columns I wrote on Larry Itliong Day on ALDEF, the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog. And I mentioned one other piece that I wrote. Oh, on Inquirer.net for the Filipino diaspora, and also on NBCnews.com or NBC News Asian America. In 2015, I wrote a piece on the 50th anniversary of the Delano grape strike. And it tells you the story about how significant, how influential Larry Itliong was in starting the grape strike, and then on September 1965, and how the the Mexican American farm workers were brought into the strike a week after, and how that really helped merge civil rights and labor rights together. 1965. And I really think that the reason why people glommed on to Chavez is because he had this Martin Luther Kingy, uh, you know, uh, had this nonviolence, and that was considered kind of hip for the time. And Larry Itliong was a cigar chewing. He had 7 fingers because he lost 3 of them when he was working up as a Alaskan cannery migrant worker. Larry was a rough and tumble guy. Cigar, he just would fight the bastards, right? He was just a tough guy. And I, once again, I just would want to dispute what was said just this Sunday in Poplar, California, at an event where they honored Larry and they named the community center for Larry Itliong. And it was said that Larry Itliong was brought in by Latinos to be part of the Agriculture Workers Organizing Committee, which I don't know if that's true, but the truth and the significance of Larry Itliong in history is that he had the vision and the foresight to let the Filipinos strike in the fields for $1.40 an hour in 1965. He did that. And he convinced the Mexican field hands to join him. And that's what created the UFW, started by Itliong. And that's why Itliong, Itliong, Larry Itliong, Filipino, born October 25th, 1913. That's the reason why yesterday, Monday, Larry Itliong Day in California. All right. Just got to say it, right? Because if we don't say it, who's going to say it? If we don't honor our history, we'll just be forgotten. People will move on, move past. We got to take the time. Got to meditate on what Brother Larry did. It was a big deal. Thank you again. Hey, if you've made it this far, join us again. Join us again next time. 2 p.m. Pacific, live Monday through Friday here. Talking about stuff that, gets to me. And it makes me a little, not upset. But these are news meditations, and we explore. And we try to come up with answers. And if you're a regular listener, if you've made it this far, this is the place we come to honor ourselves for being here, for staying with it, staying the course. If you've had a hard day, this is the place where I'll tell you, hey, you're good. You're good. Stay with it. Hang in there. No shame. No shame. Made a mistake? Correct it. Move on. You're good. You're worthy. You belong. So, as we like to say, as I wish for you, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. I need my music for this. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time, Mahal kita.